Last week we got the first 2 episodes of Sanctuary, A Witch's Tale, a British fantasy mystery thriller set in a world where witchcraft is a registered occupation. The town of Sanctuary is a place that witches have been calling their safe haven for years. However, things are about to get nasty after a young boy falls to his death at a party in an abandoned warehouse. In the first 2 episodes, we learn that Sarah is the only registered witch in Sanctuary, and her daughter Harper isn't like her mother. However, with the news of Dan the Hunk's death, everyone has been blaming Harper. A boy named Jacob, who is clearly in love with Dan, believes he has evidence against Harper, proving that she used witchcraft against Dan. Could Harper have killed Dan? What was Dan really like? Let's find out in episode 3 of Sanctuary, A Witch's Tale. While Sarah's trying to figure out how to save her daughter from her own best friend Abigail's slander, Harper is going through something much worse herself. The scandalous video from the party is released on the internet, and Harper's devastated. In the meantime, Abigail is threatening to get Harper arrested if Sarah doesn't bring Dan back to life. She's basically blackmailing her, thanks to Jacob's words. On the other hand, Sarah's office is vandalized with a satanic pentagram, while Abigail is preparing a public fight with Sarah by going to the press. The magic investigator makes it to Sanctuary and notices there was something really eerie at the party. This power is much stronger than Sarah's and much darker. Fortunately though, the Mai doesn't notice Sarah at the warehouse while investigating because of this other power, or she would have put Harper at risk. Elsewhere, Maggie meets Jacob on the street and casually asks him about the video online. He tells her it was Dan who recorded it, but blames Harper for making him do it. He then proceeds to tell Maggie that he can't talk to her without adult supervision. His father, on the other hand, has decided to completely erase anything Maggie is doing by telling the press that he's taking time off to help his son deal with the events. At home, Abigail's husband Michael gets violent when he sees the press article that shares personal details of their family with all of Sanctuary. Abigail gets terrified and runs off to meet a mystery man who wants nothing to do with her anymore, despite having loved her once. She's got nobody on her side now. Back at home, Sarah finally learns the truth about Harper and Dan. Sarah tells Harper about Abigail's blackmail, and Harper's reaction is quite shocking to Sarah. She wonders why Harper would say Dan deserves to die, and Harper puts the facts on the table. Harper tells Sarah that she broke up with Dan about a month ago very quietly so it wouldn't hurt his reputation. She had learned that he was a very different person than she had imagined. Dan had supposedly moved on with Beatrice, but it was simply a one-off thing. At a party later, Dan tried to talk to Harper and even apologized for mistreating her. But this was only to lure her into his disgusting plans. Dan then proceeded to drug Harper, sexually abuse her, and record it. The video that is now online has a soundtrack over it, so nobody can hear Harper's protests. Sarah feels awful for her daughter and wants to be there for her, but at present her safety is the most important. Sarah believes it's better for them not to talk to the press about the truth because that will make Abigail fight them even harder. Harper, of course, doesn't care about a word her mother is saying because she's obviously broken and hurt. She also feels like even her mother doesn't believe her, which makes things much worse. On the other hand, the Mai confirms that Harper was not, in fact, doing any witchcraft in the video that Jake has shared as hard evidence, proving Sarah right. The Mai's words almost make it seem like witchcraft in this world is parallel to the queer community in our world. They talk about working with law enforcement in order to give the witches a chance of being treated fairly. They also don't work for the moot because they're pretty useless in such matters. In the meantime, the other 2 friends from Sarah's coven try to talk some sense into Abigail. They remind her that Sarah is the reason she got 6 more years to spend with her son Dan, who had actually died all that time ago. Sarah had brought him back to life, despite it being an illegal act, just out of her love for Abigail, and because everyone had been desperate for him to come back. Somehow, this works on Abigail, and she's reminded of how kind Sarah had been all those years ago. She apologizes to Sarah, and Sarah asks her to promise she'll tell the whole town the truth about Harper and retract her statement against her, as well as Jake's. Everything finally seems to be back on track until the ladies are called in to look at what's happening on the news. Harper decides to go to the press about Dan's true nature. Sarah is shocked to see her daughter speak her mind when she knows that Abigail will not take this slander lightly. Abigail's love for her son is immeasurable, and she will not believe anything against him. Abigail realizes Sarah knows the truth and declares war against her and Harper. Episode 4 begins with a man who examines the warehouse before heading off to Sarah's house. When no one answers, he leaves as the theme song starts to play. At this point, Maggie believes Sarah had a motive to kill Dan if her daughter claimed she was assaulted by him. They immediately head to Sarah's home, where her friend tells her she doesn't need to go with the police if they're not arresting her. Sarah is prepared though. She's desperate to keep Harper safe, so she'll let Maggie believe anything against herself if it saves Harper from danger. At the station, Maggie learns that Sarah was with her coven on the night of the party and was drawing on her friend's energy for a regularly performed ritual. Before Maggie can question Sarah further, Sarah reminds her that it's always witches who are suspected first when anything bad happens. In the meantime, Abigail can't even get out of bed as she's grieving her son, and her husband has no idea how to help her. Sarah gets back home and tries to explain to Harper how they're both in danger Harper more than anybody since her claims were broadcast everywhere. She admits that a crime was committed against her too. However, considering Sarah's a witch, they have to be extra cautious. Sarah wishes she could have prevented the sexual assault with her powers, but at least she can protect her daughter from whatever's coming next. On the other hand, Abigail's husband finally plans a memorial for their son, claiming that it would be the best way for them to show support for Dan and fix his reputation. If his family and friends showed how much they loved Dan, there's no way anyone would believe what Harper said. Abigail loves the idea and calls her husband brilliant. In the meantime, a man named Robert Alton arrives at Sarah's home. He is the man from the beginning of the episode. Alton is a lawyer sent by the Moot. Sarah immediately tries to explain to him how she and her daughter have nothing to do with what happened to Dan. However, Alton says he must first conduct a thorough investigation to come to a decision about whether to represent them or not on behalf of the Moot. On the other hand, Maggie realizes Harper said in the broadcast that there might have been other girls who got assaulted by Dan too. She tries to investigate through Beatrice first, who completely denies the claim and calls Harper names again. Jake's dad took a break from his job to support his son. Sexual assault is a serious accusation, and he hopes Jake can tell him anything if it'll help Harper's case. Alton introduces himself to Maggie, telling her that he's around to make sure that witches are not made the sacrificial lamb in such cases. Abigail tells her two friends about the memorial and demands that they show up. She wants everyone to know that none of them are on Sarah's side. However, they're not so keen since Sarah has helped them all so much. It's crazy how people turn so quickly against those who are different. Sarah tries to talk to Jake by barging into their house. However, his father immediately rushes to Maggie, telling her that Sarah's threatening and blackmailing him. When Maggie asks how Sarah's doing so, he simply evades the question and asks her to do her job. At the memorial, Abigail tells everyone that they need to reclaim Sanctuary and stop the witches from ruling them. She puts thoughts in their heads about how witches control everything with no one knowing. She takes the example of Beatrice's parents. It turns out Beatrice's mother had asked Sarah's help to have her husband love her again when he didn't anymore. Of course, Abigail would bring this story up since she was cheating with the man and was in love with him. Since she can't have him anymore, she tarnishes their whole family's name. Back at home, Maggie visits Beatrice, asking for her phone. Maggie believes Beatrice was the one who made the video of Dan and Harper public. On the other hand, she learns that Dan was very much still in love with Harper, so she doesn't believe he would assault her. Dan only got with Beatrice to make Harper jealous, which made Beatrice more infuriated. It seems like she's always been jealous of Harper, and Dan was the last straw. Back in the witch's household, Sarah finally connects with Harper and tells her to keep her head held high and not hide anything anymore. Unfortunately, at the end, Alton visits Sarah and tells her that he knows she's conducted some illegal activities. Sarah is stumped at first and tells him that she's never done anything that would mess with the reputation of the witches in the world. However, she realizes quickly that he means what she did for Dan all those years ago. Alton objectively tells Sarah that they cannot have a witch like her tarnish the Moot's reputation, and so he will not represent her. On the other hand, Beatrice gets some classmates to bully Harper, calling her names and even faking a magical attack by Harper. She gets the boys to dunk Harper in the fountain in front of the school, and when Harper goes unconscious, she tells them to keep her there. Beatrice really believes Harper is using magic, and that's how she killed desperate Dan. Things are getting really dark really quick in Sanctuary, and we'll have to wait another week to learn how Sarah will protect Harper and investigate the truth while facing the wrath of Abigail.